Hi, I'm Dr. Lloyd Corder. Welcome to week 7 of Nonverbal Communication, the video overview of this week's material. What we're going to be focused on this week are really two topics. One is body movements and posture, and the other is branding. Now, body movements, there's a lot of great information in your particular chapter. And these body movements communicate all sorts of things, like whether or not we're included in a group and our status and the different emotional states that we're having or feeling. How we even go about interacting with different people, whether we're lying, gestures, all of those different types of topics are in this whole concept of body movements. Now, what's the other part that I put in here that I want to spend most of the time on in terms of this preview is this whole concept of branding. And to set this up, I've got a little test for you here. What's the difference between a product versus a brand? So if I'm going to look at the left here, and I've got a product and I'm reading this and it says whole grain oats, marshmallow, yellow 5 and 6, red 40, or red 40, blue 1. That's artificial coloring or food dye. That's the same stuff they put in your shampoo. That stuff is nasty. It makes me swell up. That's totally disgusting. How do we sell that? My question to you is, what is that product? How about this? It's Lucky Charms. So on the left, we have a bunch of nonsense words that are practically impossible to figure out how to sell that. On the right, we have something called Lucky Charms. It's magically delicious. Wow, a positive group of images in a word or a phrase or icons that are very different than the left-hand side. How about this next one here? What's that stuff? Carbonated water, fructose, corn syrup, so on and so forth. It's Coca-Cola, #1 brand in the world. Well, what are some brands that are out there in the world? Here are the top 10 brands, and these are groups that have really, really strong perceptions. You've got things like Apple, we mentioned Coke, Microsoft, Google, IBM, McDonald's, AT&T, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, which is all the Pepsi-type products, and Philip Morris. Those were really considered to be the top 10 brands, at least in 2011, and that's probably still a pretty accurate list. So what do we know about a brand and why do we care about them? Well, basically, a brand is a collection of feelings that people have about your product, services, or even about you. And it's basically a promise of how you're going to be or how you're going to act. And it shortens the buying cycle and it does all sorts of good things. It's worth usually a lot more in terms of what people will pay if you've got a good brand than what they won't pay. These are all things that are very, very positive. Now, traditionally, it used to be about things like soap and I don't know, different products and so forth. But if you look at some of the Nike commercials that are going on now, it's more about lifestyle and kind of vague things, if you will, but people or things that you could become by using these particular products. And so it's a very, very interesting field that seems to be changing and becoming more and more and more dynamic. One of the things that's very interesting to me are these branding laws, to help you understand a few of these here. What is a brand? Oh, wait, sorry, did that already. So one of the branding laws, law of expansion. And I put down here Harley Davidson wine coolers. I'm not making that up. That's a real product. It's a real failed product, by the way. When you think of Harley Davidson, does wine cooler come to mind? Me, it doesn't. Probably whiskey. Harder the better. These are rough, tumble, hard-nosed type people. They're not wine cooler drinkers. So if you think about it for a moment, that product was too far outside of what people expected for that particular brand. So it didn't go too well. How about the law of contraction? When you get more focused, your brand gets stronger. Have you ever heard of something called Starbucks? What's it about? When you think about Starbucks, in my mind, what comes in my head is coffee. But I want to know something. Can you get a cookie at Starbucks? Can you buy a sheet of paper or some stationery? Can you get a glass of milk? Of course. You can get a whole bunch of things that don't have anything to do with coffee. And just because they branded themselves around one way doesn't mean that they can't do those other pieces. But that brand makes it simple. They've built this whole kind of atmosphere for folks to come in. And even things like law of publicity, which is what we call the birth of the brand, was by PR versus advertising. If you look at things like Microsoft or Dell or any of these other companies, they were launched with articles in the Wall Street Journal, not big advertising programs. And so a lot of companies, when they start, they don't have a lot of money, so they use earned media to get their coverage. And so all of these different topics, in my mind, are very, very interesting in terms of branding and body movements. And they communicate a lot about who the person is in terms of their body movements, their stature, whatever. Well, the brands do the same thing. There's brands, wow, that brand's worth a lot of money versus it's cheap. And people get perceptions, and they set their perceptions based on what they think of that particular person or what they think of that particular brand. So we've kind of grouped those two together this week, and we're going to have some discussion points around them and some insights and some energy. So guys, have a great week, and we will see you for next week's preview. Thank you.